All right, so let me share my screen if I can. Folks on Zoom, are you seeing my notes, or are you seeing, oh no, scratch that, hold on. There we go. Are you seeing the full screen now, or are you seeing the one with like notes and other stuff going on? Just somebody just shout out.
We're seeing your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let's get going. So chapter 6, so we will have another exam 2 this coming weekend. We'll cover 4, 5, 6. So this is the last chapter that'll be on that exam. So we're going to start talking finance. So there we go. So we talked about the quad model earlier in the class. And the idea basically is kind of 4 parts, hence the quad model of kind of how healthcare is paid for. And we'll talk about each of these together. And so but financing, who pays for it? Who comes up with the resources, I should say. Insurance is indemnifying you from catastrophic loss. Payment is the negotiation of prices and the actual cash from hand to hand. And then delivery in this case is going to be, the actual provision of healthcare. So financing, who provides the resources? And so the choices you've got are, individuals, like each of us could buy our own healthcare, pay for our own healthcare. Most people don't do that. In the United States, most people get their health insurance, right? And most people get most of the financing of their healthcare through their employers. But also you can get government financing in the United States and elsewhere. You can get government financing. You can get at the federal level, the state, and the local levels, or you can get some blend of all of those. So when employers pay, health insurance is kind of part of your overall compensation. So I was telling you back, a number of classes ago, I was kind of stunned by the amount that UNH contributes to cover my health insurance. And, the total pay for my health insurance is about 20 grand, right? And it's not me particularly, like all UNH faculty, it's about 20 grand for, I have the policy where that covers me and my kids. My wife is not on it. And that's because my wife is covered by the military health insurance that I have. And long story, I won't get into all that way. And eventually, once my kids age off, I will ditch the UNH insurance. But I was stunned to see, the total bill was 20 grand, of which UNH is paying 16,000 of it. But here's the thing, UNH looks at my total compensation as the amount of cash that UNH gives me, plus the 16,000 that I don't ever see. So if so if I made $50,000, I make a little more than that, but if I made $50,000 a year, right, UNH would be like, all right, that's $50,000 in cash plus $16,000 in health insurance for a total of $66,000 that we pay for him. They don't, your employer doesn't care that which portion of it is cash and which portion of it is benefits. They just look as an employer, and if you all ever sit in that position, you look at the manpower cost as the total of cash and benefits. You don't separate those two things out. So me as a former finance guy, I would, somebody would come to me and say, hey, I'd like to hire another nurse. And they'd say, it's only like $80,000. I say, stop, stop. It's $80,000 in cash, plus we add on about a 1/3 kicker. So, 30% on, 33% on top of that. So what's that, like another $28,000. So really the full cost of a nurse is not $80,000, but pushing $110,000. So, we don't tend to think a whole lot about that because we don't see the cash for that in my case, that's $16,000, right? But that's really part of my cost to UNH, right? So we get wages, but then we get benefits, and health insurance is just one of those benefits. We also, most employers will also include life insurance, retirement plans of some sort. You all are very young, but You will care about that someday, trust me. Disability insurance, childcare, elder, there's just a whole slew of nice perks, but also things like, an office that you get to go to. That's nice, right? So my office is kind of, filled with secondhand furniture, and and my office chair is probably as old as I am, but it's fine, right? Like, it's better to have one than not have one. I've had I've had worse offices. But having an office by itself is actually like a privilege. Like, that's a part of my compensation. As modest as it might, as the office might be, it's a place where I can go and, I have a second space where I can work from home, or I can go to my office, meet with students, meet with colleagues. So that's part of my compensation, right? Is that, and recently had a listen to the President Dean talking about faculty offices, and the fact that, we might be in a faculty because we kind of come and go, and we're in a classroom, and then we're just like, oh, I'm going to work from home today or whatever, or I'm going to go work at the works. The faculty offices sit empty like 80% of the time. And so he's like, maybe that's not such a thing we need. And I'm like, that's part of my compensation. Fine. You want my office? You pay me more, right? So, so when we think about our total compensation, it's not just the cash that you actually get and take home. It's also all these benefits that you get, right? And then it's also things like, do I have an office? Do I have a nice workspace? All these things all kind of come together as part of our total compensation. Now, so let's talk about financing and what employers actually pay, right? So let's just imagine that you have an employer that would be willing to pay $100,000 cash for somebody, right? So for an employee. So let's say we could get a nurse for $100,000. And this person says, you know what, I'd like to have health insurance. And the employer's like, fine, that'll be $10,000. So what I'll do is I'll pay you $90,000 and give you health insurance that costs $10,000. As long as that adds up to $100,000, I, as the employer, don't care, right? Because I'll give you $100,000 cash, or I'll give you $90,000 cash, and then I will spend $10,000 for your healthcare. As long as it all adds up to 100, I am indifferent from the employer side. But you, as an employee in the United States, are not indifferent between those two things. And here's why you like this as future employees. Your healthcare benefits come tax-free. So you're getting, let's say, $100,000 in total compensation, 90 of which is cash, and $10,000 is this health insurance benefit that, if your employer didn't give it to you as part of your compensation, you would have to buy, right? Which you could do. You could go out and buy the health insurance on your own, right? Instead of getting it through your employer. So let's say that, let's say you're in the 28% tax bracket, which means you're going to pay 28% income taxes on your compensation. If you pay, so let's do the obvious math. If you're making $100,000 and you have to pay 28% taxes, 28% of 100 is 28, right? So that's easy math. Now, you're going to pay. So if I paid you all cash instead of no benefits, you'd get the $100,000 in cash, and you'd pay 28,000, and you'd have to take 10,000 of that, presumably, and go buy health insurance. Now, instead, if I offer to you and say, I will pay you $90,000 in cash, and I will buy your health insurance for you and pay pay $10,000 for you. Now the government's only going to tax, you're only going to pay income taxes on $90,000, and then I'm going to give you this $10,000 benefit tax-free, right? So now you don't have to pay so instead of having to go buy the $10,000 worth of health insurance with your money that you've already paid tax on, you're going to get, I'm going to buy that for you. You don't pay any taxes on that $10,000 that I'm spending on your health insurance. And so you're actually better off. How are you better off? Well, you would have paid $28,000 in taxes. Instead, you're only paying $25,200 in taxes because you're only paying the taxes on the $90,000. And so you're better off by $2,800, right? So you're getting that. So health insurance, the employer contribution of health insurance is tax-free to you. And so you're actually better off. You effectively are making $102,800 rather than $100,000 if you let me, as your employer, pay for your health insurance. Right? Again, the employer doesn't care. The employer is indifferent between paying $100,000 cash or paying $90,000 cash and $10,000 in benefits. It's a benefit to you to receive the health insurance tax-free. The other way to think about this is you're getting $10,000 in compensation, not taxed. You would have had to pay, you would have paid $2,800 on, $2,800 on that $10,000. So you get to keep that cash. So that's why every now and then you'll hear somebody in Congress will start talking about removing the tax deductibility of health insurance for the employer, because the employer is able to, if the employer pays your health insurance bill, they're able to treat it as an expense, and it reduces the taxes that they have to pay. Every now and then, somebody in Congress will say, we should just remove that privilege, and employers wouldn't get the tax write-off, at which point employers would stop providing health insurance, or it would cost you more. This is part of why we get so locked in the United States. We are locked into this relationship with our employers and getting health insurance through our employers, because we can get it at this significant discount, right? It's a 20, depending on how much money you make and the tax bracket you are in, it kind of defines how much of a benefit that actually is. But this simple example, which really does probably understate the benefit, right? You're essentially getting almost $3,000. In this example, you're getting like $3,000 free, right? If I take that benefit away, now you have to pay more. So again, the main point here is the employer doesn't care, right? The employer will give you the $100,000 cash, or will give you the $90,000 in cash plus $10,000 in benefits. They don't care, right? It is beneficial to you because it protects you from having to pay taxes. So we look at the government paying, right? How does the government finance the provision of healthcare? Well, it taxes, right? It taxes everybody. So Medicare, right, is a federal program that we talked about. So federal program. So we're going to talk a lot about it as we go along. Levels of government in the United States. There's two primary layers of government. There's the federal and state. And then with the state, there's state and local. So kind of three layers, depending on how you want to look at it. The federal government has Medicare. You all pay, so here's an example. You all pay Medicare tax on when you get your paychecks, right? You're getting FICA and Medicare, Social Security taxes, and that is Medicare and Social Security, I'd say it's 7.5%. You pay out of your, so if you earn $100, you pay 7.5, so $77.50 towards Medicare and Social Security. But your employer has to pay a matching amount of 7.5% that you never see. So it's kind of like the healthcare example. You cost your employer an extra 7.5%. So if you made $100, your employer has to pay. You pay 7.5% of that, but your employer pays 7.5% of your 100. So the employer, your cost, if you made $100, your employer is actually paying $107.50. Which, if they weren't paying that $7.50 to the federal government, they could pay it to you, right? Because they'd be indifferent between paying it to you and paying that extra $7.50 to the federal government. They just don't have a choice. They don't pay the $7.50, they go to jail. So your paycheck is effectively reduced by the fact that there's this, it's called a payroll tax that you never even see, right? And that money that's collected to fund Medicare and Social Security isn't going into an account with your name on it. So there's no account with James, there's no account with Frankie on it, right? That money goes in to pay for current beneficiaries. So every now and then the Social Security, have any of you guys ever gotten a letter from Social Security saying this is how much money you'll get someday when you retire? Yeah. Okay. You will, and here's the thing is that's based on current projections and the assumption that Social Security still has money to do it, but there's no account with your name on it where there's like, savings building up. And so that when it comes time for you to retire, that there's going to be this money that you're going to draw on. Your money goes to pay for current retirees. So whatever you pay into Social Security today goes to fund people that are currently collecting Social Security. Whatever you pay in on Medicare today goes to fund current Medicare beneficiaries. So some examples of federal programs that are funded by federal taxes. So that's payroll tax. Medicare is partially funded by payroll taxes, partially funded by general fund. Veterans Health Administration is part of the Veterans Administration. The VHA is the healthcare arm of the VA. The VA provides a lot of other benefits in addition to healthcare. But the VA is covered by general fund. So that's now your income taxes and other stuff that goes to pay that. Then there's the military health system. That's where I worked for my first career. And I'm still a beneficiary of the military health system because as a retired military person, I have access to the military health system until I turn 65 and qualify for Medicare, at which point the military health system then acts as a Medicare supplement, which we'll talk a little bit about. So you have the military health system that provides health care to all the active duty military plus retirees and retiree family members, and active duty family members, all that. And we have the Indian Health Services. Realize the name is outdated, but that's what it's called. Also federal funded. And then there's some other smaller ones that kind of prison system, federal prison system has a health system, so all that, right? All that is funded by taxes that are collected from you, the citizens, right, to pay for. Then we have kind of blended, we've talked about federal and state, Medicaid. That's a program, a program that is funded by federal taxes and state taxes. And then state and local governments have a variety of healthcare related programs, including things like public health programs. But so for example, I think I've mentioned that my sister is a family medicine doctor, and she practices in Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia, and she actually works for a City of Philadelphia clinic. So she is a provider for people that can't afford healthcare on their own, so they're qualified to get this free or very reduced care, and she's part of that program. So her salary comes from the City of Philadelphia. So that's an example of what that is. All right, so we talked about financing. It's individual, right? So just repeat here. Individual, where's the money coming from to pay for your bill, pay for your healthcare bills? Individual, that could be you individually. It could come from your employer, or it can come from the government, one of the levels of government. Okay, so now we're into the next bubble, which is insurance. So we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but I want to make the point again about insurance, right? There's kind of 4 key principles of insurance. First is indemnity. What indemnity means is insurance to be indemnified is to be made whole when you have some sort of loss. So if you get in a car accident and do $5,000 worth of damage to your car, right? You go to your insurance company. They tell you to go get, have an adjuster look at your car. They decide, okay, there's $5,000 worth of damage, and usually what they will do is they'll tell you, we will send you a check for $5,000, or you can take your car to one of our preferred providers, and they will we'll send the check directly to them. the idea where you're getting that $5,000 check is basic indemnity, is what we mean by indemnity insurance. You have experienced a $5,000 loss. The insurance company is sending you a check for $5,000. The idea that, the idea that they have a network that they're going to kind of funnel you into is secondary. You guys ever see I'm sure you've seen the Aflac commercials with the duck, Aflac, right? So it does that. So that's an example of indemnity insurance. And some of the examples are like, oh, you fall down and get hurt, we'll send you some money, right? The idea is Aflac is not health insurance. It is indemnity insurance for a variety of losses. So they give an estimate of what the loss is, and then they quantify it in terms of dollars, like how much did you lose time at work? Did you, and then they indemnify you from that loss, and they send you a check meant to represent the amount of financial loss that you experienced, right? So first main point of insurance is indemnity. Second is true insurance. Remember, I talked about this idea of pure insurance, real insurance, as opposed to prepaid expenses, which is what a lot of healthcare is. True insurance assumes that risk is unpredictable at the individual level. But if we aggregate ourselves up into big populations, we can make kind of guesses about how many people inside that big population will break their leg this year, how many will get COVID, how many will, have a heart attack, and so at the risk is unpredictable at the individual level, meaning I don't know. I could this year have a stroke. I could this year have a heart attack. I could this year, get into a car wreck and have some other kind of serious injury. But standing here today, I have no means of looking into the future and knowing that's going to happen. There is some possibility that one of those bad things will happen to me. It's a relatively low possibility, knock on wood, but it is a real possibility. I get cancer. So that is an unpredictable thing at the individual level. But if we aggregate up to large populations, what we can start talking about are, for every 1,000 people or for every 100,000 people, we would expect to see this many of that population have something bad happen to them. We would expect, out of every 100,000 people, we would expect 50 of them to get pancreatic cancer, for example, right? But in looking at that 100,000 people, we'll say, well, there's this big pool of people, 50 of them are going to get cancer, but I can't pick it out. It's going to be Bob over there, or Bob. But we don't know who it's going to be. It could be Bob, it could be Susie, it could be Joni, right? We don't know, and that's the point. Is it's unpredictable. It can the number of people that are going to have an incident like that or have something bad happen becomes predictable as we get larger and larger populations. But even once we have that prediction of this is how many it's going to be, we still don't know which people it's going to be. So the assumption here is that there's some possibility that I could get sick, some possibility that I could be injured, but it's not predictable. With the law, what we call the law of large numbers, the bigger the population, the more predictable it becomes that some number of people in the population will get sick or injured, but we don't know at the outset which ones will be. So what we do is, in insurance, is we all get together and put our money together, or pool our money together, recognizing that, say, of 1,000 of us, right, 5 of us are going to get hurt, and that 5 people are going to need $1,000. So what we do is we say, okay, that means the total amount of money that's going to be needed to indemnify the population is going to be, say, 5 times $1,000, $5,000. Then we divide that $5,000 across all 1,000 of us, right? And we each pay $5 because we don't know which of us is going to get hurt. But what we do know is the overall group is going to need $5,000. So if we all pitch in $5, it's relatively low cost to any one of us. But at the end of the day, after we find out which of the 5 people are going to be unlucky, there's going to be a pool of money that they're able to draw from. So that's the essence of insurance, right? Is none of us know at the start which of us is going to get hurt. We just know, statistically speaking, some of us are going to get hurt. And so we contribute money up front so that there's money to take care of the people who do get hurt. And hopefully it's not us. So then, basically what's happening by each of us paying in a premium, that little $5, right, to cover the $1,000 loss that these people are having, we're all sharing in the loss. So you could be like, I'm not going to play, right? And there's a very there's a 995 out of 1,000 chance that you won't get hurt. But if you do get hurt, you wind up with bearing the full cost. So we try it. What we do instead is we all kind of come together and share we pool. So it's called pooling. We all pool our resources together, right? And then in that sense, we all share in the loss, but we all share in a small loss rather than one big catastrophic loss. So these ideas really apply to pure insurance, right? So when I say pure insurance, it's the first three. Well, the risk pieces are the important piece of making it pure insurance. It's the fact that risk is unpredictable and that and unknowable as to whether you will have the accident or not. Whereas, the example I use is like dental insurance, right? Dental insurance covers typically 2 cleanings a year. That's a completely predictable expense. You're going to go get your 2 cleanings a year. That's not insurance. We call it insurance, but that's really a prepaid expense. Your insurance is going to, your premiums are going to include the cost of 2 cleanings. They're just going to get spread over 12 monthly payments. So if it costs you $60 per cleaning, just to make the numbers easy for me, right? 2 cleanings a year is $120. So $10, your insurance company is going to charge you $10 a month to cover the cost of cleanings, plus any costs of you need a crown, right? That's unpredictable. Maybe like you crack a tooth and you need a crown, or you need a root canal. Hopefully you're not getting a root canal on a regular basis. It's pretty unpleasant, trust me. So that's so when we talk about insurance, the insurance component, the true pure insurance component of health insurance, it's the unpredictable part. It's not your annual physicals. It's not your immunizations. It's, oh shoot, I have cancer, right? That's the unpredictable part. All right, so let's do an example. So Archibald is a big skier. He has a 1 in 100 chance of breaking his leg. The cost of the care would be $30,000 if he does in fact break his leg. Without insurance, he's got 2 possible outcomes: a 99% chance that he's going to go skiing and he's going to be fine, a 1% chance that he's going to have a $30,000 bill. Since he only makes $50,000 a year, $30,000 would be devastating. It might mean, it could wipe him out. It could make him homeless. He could lose his car, right? So this is, by definition, this is what we mean when we say a catastrophic loss. If Archibald makes $50,000 a year and he has a 1% chance of losing $10, he can absorb the $10. If he has an iPhone and they're like, hey, we want to sell you iPhone insurance, right? It'll cover $100, $100 to replace your screen. It's only $10 a month. Why am I going to pay $120 to insure against a $100 loss? That doesn't make any sense. And that's what a lot of, if you go to Best Buy and you're buying like a new, whatever, camera or something like that, and they offer you these insurances, and it's, maybe you're putting down a couple $100, but if you can absorb the idea here is if you can absorb, let's say you're spending $200 on a new camera. If you're making $50,000 a year, you can if you lost your camera or you broke your camera, you could go buy a new one. It wouldn't be the thing you'd like to do, but you could absorb it. So you shouldn't bother buying insurance on stuff that you can absorb. What you want to truly buy insurance for is the potential catastrophic losses. And $30,000 for a health issue is actually not that big. So how do we calculate what Archibald, let's say, what we do with Archibald, what would an insurance company be willing to sell him insurance for? So let's look at, so he decides to join a pool of the skiers who all have the same chance of getting hurt and the same costs. So now it's not just Archibald, it's like the UNH ski club, right? So they're all going to go out and they all know that there's a 1 in 100 chance that one of them is going to break their leg. And if they do, right, they will incur a $30,000 loss. So how do we calculate this? Well, what we do is we estimate the expected medical loss. Let me do that here. I'm going to stop my share. One second, I need to. All right, so we said he's got a 1% chance of a $30,000 loss. So how much, if now let's assume he's going to join up with a whole, maybe another 100 people. So what they know is if they pool together, one of them is likely to get hurt. And then the other 99 are going to be fine. So that means that the expected medical loss is going to be $30,000. So what we can say is the state is healthy or hurt. The probability is 99% is the same thing as 0.99 or 0.01. The loss, if you're healthy, is 0, and if you're hurt, is 30,000. So what we want to do is figure out statistically what would be the loss that Archibald would expect. Right? So what we do is we multiply the probability times the loss for each and then add them together. So 0 times 0.99 is, of course, just 0, right? Anything times 0 is 0. And then 1% of 30,000, well, you move 2 zeros over, is 300. So the expected loss, when I do E with loss in the parentheses, it's my expected loss is the sum of these two statistical conditions. And so that's $300. So if Archibald was to ski every year forever, he would every 100 years, he would have a $30,000 loss. And so if we average that $30,000 over the 100 years, right, he would have 300, it would cost him $300 a year. So one thing he could do is he could save $300 a year, put it in the bank account, right? And every time he got hurt, he could draw down the bank account, right? And if he was always getting a 1% loss, right, if that was accurate, on average, he would have enough money to pay this off. This is how, by the way, how casinos make their money, right? And you guys ever been to casinos? Yeah, good times, right? So I like roulette myself. That's my game because I feel like I can predict where the ball is going to land, which is completely stupid because you can't, right? Statistically speaking. But what's funny about, so have you guys played roulette? No. So it's it's the wheel thing, right? It's like I feel very James Bond when I go play my roulette. I give myself a martini and I just stand there, play on red. But so roulette is like a wheel, right? And it's got these slots and they spin it and the little marble goes and lands right in the slot. And if you bet on the right slot, you win. And so there are 18 red and 18 black slots. There are 18 even and 18 odd slots with numbers. So you can play like an individual slot. You could be like, I just want to bet on number 22, right? And if you do that, if you bet on 22 and it hits 22, you get 36 times whatever you bet. So if you bet $1, you get $36, right? The thing is that there, in addition to the 18 red and the 18 black, there are 2 green slots. This like green and green here that are 0 and 00. And so instead of having a 1 in 36 chance of winning, you actually have a 1 in 38 chance of winning, but your payouts are at best 36 to 1. So what happens is, on average, if you keep playing, the house has something like a 51 or 52% chance of winning. So, and you have a 48% chance of winning. So if you play enough times, the house will have beaten you eventually. And so the assumption here is, you, as you know, James may go in and hit 22 and get 30, woohoo, right? And then the rest of us go in and we all lose, right? So on average, just because James won doesn't mean that any of us are going to win, right? But on average, there'll be one person that wins and 37 people who don't, even though the best James could do is a 36 to 1. So the odds are always in favor of the house, right? So it's a, so this game, so that's how casinos win, is they can play longer than you can, right? So Archibald out skiing can't play in an infinite number of times. Sooner or later he's going to die anyway, right? He's going to get old and he's going to stop skiing. So he faces a risk in a sense that the house, the casino does not face. So this is actually if the insurance company would basically say, okay, we have an expected loss of $300. But the insurance company is not going to, and what they could do is everybody could contribute $300, right, to a kitty. So if you had 100 people on the ski team, everybody could contribute $300 to a fund, and they could self-insure, meaning, we all pitch in the $300 at the beginning of the season, and the one person that gets hurt gets the $30,000 to indemnify them, right, to make them whole again from their loss. An insurance company could do that. Well, it actually can't do that, and it won't do that. So a fair game, this is called a fair game, right? Where this would be a fair game price, where the premium equals the expected loss. So if the premium was $300, this would be a fair game in the sense that there'd be no money left over. The house wouldn't win. And if we're all on the ski team self-insuring, there isn't a goal of anybody winding up with money left over. The goal is to just cover whoever gets hurt, right? So there's this expected loss of $300. If we're going to do that with it, I just want to check one thing. All right, 85%. So the expected medical loss is going to be, for the insurance company, is going to be $300 per participant, because there's a 1% chance of any one of them getting a $30,000 loss. So the expected loss for the insurance company per person is going to be 300. So we're going to call this the medical loss is going to equal $300 per person on average, right? Because it's a 1% chance. Now, the insurance company, if it was able to do a fair game pricing, would just charge you $300, because every person that added, there's a 1% chance that they're going to have to pay out to you. And so if they collected the $300, they could then pay off whoever gets hurt. Now, here's the thing, insurance companies, even if you're a not-for-profit insurance company, so like Harvard Pilgrim is a not-for-profit insurance company. It doesn't have shareholders that expect to get a dividend, a payout from the profits. Harvard Pilgrim is supposed to take any profits it makes and reinvest it in providing healthcare for its members. as opposed to, say, a Cigna, which is a for-profit company, which charges you your premiums and hopes to keep some of that to pay its shareholders. But here's the problem. Even if Harvard Pilgrim, which is a not-for-profit company, at the end of the day, they're supposed to take any excess money that they have and reinvest that back in providing healthcare for their patients, or they'll literally send the money back to you, which is also a possibility. Even Harvard Pilgrim can't do this where if they have an expected medical loss of $300, they can't charge you a $300 premium. Why might that be? Any thoughts, Frankie?
They need to pay the people to run the plan.
They have to pay people to run the plan, right? So one of you might decide when you graduate, you know what I really want to do? I want to be part of big insurance. And so you go get a job working in insurance, right? So somebody has to organize all this money, right? Like somebody has to receive all the checks, the $300 checks that come in, right? They have to then, make sure that it's invested because they don't, put it in a bank account. They have to communicate with you to send you like the bill. They have to, they have to market the plan. So they have to tell people about it. Like marketing isn't just like, advertising isn't just like this annoying thing. It is also like letting you know, hey, there's a product that you might be interested in. That's not free. So there's all these costs, there's these administrative costs of running the plan. So they can't collect just enough money from each participant to cover the expected medical loss. They have to also collect some amount of money in addition to that for the operation of the plan, for the administration of the plan. Plus, if you're a for-profit company, you have to collect enough money to pay your investors. So what under the ACA, I mentioned this 1 or 2 times ago, talking about the medical loss ratio that's allowed. So I've mentioned this before, but now it's important. Medical loss ratio, right, is the amount of the premiums that a percent of the premiums collected that must be paid out for medical costs. And I said, what I told you before is for a large insurance company, the medical loss ratio must be greater than or equal to 85% of the premiums collected. So if they collect $1,000 in premiums, if a large health insurer collects $1,000 in premiums, they have to pay out 85% of that towards actual medical bills. So if you collect $1,000, they have to pay out at least $850 in premiums, in medical expense, towards medical expenses. So they've got to have enough Archibalds breaking their leg, and somebody, having to pay the orthopods and all that, and the PTs and so forth, such that $850 winds up going towards medical losses, which means that they can keep no more than 15% of the premiums that they collect towards administrative costs, such as marketing, administration, paying the bills, all that sort of stuff, and profit. So if our expected, so the way this works then is we can now figure out what would be the premium that the insurance company would charge Archibald. Let's assume that they are targeting an 85% medical loss ratio. Well, that means that 85% of the premium, if 85% of the premium has to be paid out for medical costs, then what we could say is 0.85 times the premium is going to equal $300. So 85% of the premium has to equal $300. So what can the premium be? Well, we just divide through by 0.85. And we get the premium is equal to $300 divided by 0.85. So 300 divided by 0.85, $352.94. So even though the expected actual medical costs will be on average $300 per member, the insurance company is going to charge us $352 because they want to keep at least 15%, up to 15% of that premium for their administrative, marketing, and profit purposes. All right. So I've got some examples. This will be in your homework this week to do a few problems like this. Let me see. I've got another one. All right. I just got to share my screen so you can see this. Those of you playing along at home. All right. So here's another problem for you. Let's try this one. Ruben is a race car driver. He has a 2 in 1,000 chance of a catastrophic accident that will likely have medical bills of $250,000. Assume the insurance company would be willing to pool him with other race car drivers and offer insurance. Assume that this is a small group policy and the insurance company uses an MLR of 80%. What would Ruben's premium be? So with small insurance, companies are allowed to have a lower MLR, meaning they're allowed to keep more of the premium. So we've got to figure out what's the expected loss, and then what would be the premium based on the expected loss. What would be the premium? That's, you can't see it. I'll give you a second to work it. All right, so stop the share. So what did you get for the expected loss? 500. Okay, so how did you get it?
You do 0.002.
Okay. Very good. All right, so so you're skipping my steps, but that's okay. So state, he's like, what's his chance of being healthy? Well, that would be, probability would be 998 out of 1,000, right? And the loss would be 0, right? So probability times loss would be 0, and then hurt would be 2 out of 1,000, or 0.002, like you said. The loss would be 250,000. So 2 over 1,000, or 1 over 500 times 250,000 gives you $500. So the expected loss is the sum of 0 and 500, which is 500. Now we're doing this example is a super simple example. You could have multiple possible states. You have 3 different states, 4 different states, 10 different states, all with different probabilities and all with possible losses, right? So you could have, one where he gets in a really bad car crash, where he gets his $250,000 in losses, one where he just gets a little banged up and it's $20,000 in losses, and you could have but you would do the same process. You'd be like, well, what's the probability of each of them? What's the expected loss of each of them? You'd cross multiply and then add that result up. So the expected loss is $500. All right. And then if they're allowed to have an 80% MLR, what is the likely premium that they would charge? Get that too? How much? Okay, and you get that by doing? Good. All right. So 500 divided. So we have, they're allowed to keep 80% of the premium is going to equal the loss. And so you divide through by 0.8, divide through by 0.8, right? And you get a premium of 625. So 500 divided by 8.8, 500 divided by 0.8, 625. Good. So on average, they would expect to incur $500 in medical losses for every person that they insure. But in fact, in any given race, right, there might be 0 people hurt, right? Or there might be more than 1 person hurt. But when you average it out over race after race after race, the beautiful thing of, like, insurance companies are like the casino. They can keep on going because they have deep pockets. We, go in with our $20 or whatever, we lose it all and go broke and we're out, right? But casinos and insurance companies tend to have deep pockets where they can keep playing the game over and over and over again. And on average, the insurance company is going to win, in the sense that it's going to collect enough premiums to cover not only the medical losses, but also its administrative costs and profits. So this is the basics of how insurance premiums get set. Let me get back to. Yeah. All right, so answer 625. All right, so now let's move on to payment. Who pays for the delivery of services, right? Payment. So as opposed to financing. So financing, what's the difference between payment and financing? Because they sound the same. The difference is financing is the source of the money, the source of the resources. That's you as an individual. It's the federal government through collecting taxes. It's the local state government through collecting taxes. It's the local governments, the city, collecting taxes, or it's your employer taking money out of your paycheck to cover your health insurance, right? One thing I want you to take away from this is it's not health insurance provided by your employer is not free to you, right? It is if you receive health insurance through your employer, you are receiving reduced wages. The employer would pay you more if they didn't have to pay insurance. So the financing portion of our quad model is, where do the resources come from? The payment is who actually negotiates with the provider and then sends the provider checks, right? So you as an individual could pay for your services directly. So you could negotiate your payments with your provider. There are, they're not common, but there are these things called cash-only practices. Some of you may go to, an increasing number of mental health providers are not taking insurance. So some of you may, if you work with those folks, you may have a cash-only provider in that case. A lot of psychiatrists have realized that they're in so much demand that they don't have to deal with insurance companies. And if you don't know, if you ever meet a doctor or get a chance to talk to it, I mean, you all know your doctors, but like if you ever get a chance to talk to a doctor and ask them, how much do you like dealing with insurance companies? They're gonna go off for like 20 minutes on how much they hate insurance companies, right? And so doctors, like psychiatrists, for example, are in real shortage. There are not enough psychiatrists to go around. So many psychiatrists are just simply saying, I don't take insurance anymore. If you want to deal with insurance, you can deal, I will give you a bill and you can give it to your insurance company and then you can work it out between them. So a lot of psychiatrists are doing that. A lot of psychologists are doing that as well, especially psychologists that specialize in testing for things like autism or other learning disabilities. Basically, like, I'm in so much demand that I don't have to deal with the insurance company, right? You can pay me $500 an hour or whatever it is they charge. And then you can try to get that money out of your insurance company. But I'm just going to you show up in my practice, bring your credit card because I'm not taking insurance. So we have these kind of growth of cash only practices. Some of them, when it's primary care, they use the acronym direct primary care, which means, is a nice way of saying I only take cash, but it's kind of like the idea is I deal directly with the patient. It sounds cute, right? I deal directly with you, no insurance company between us. Really means, probably charging you more than I'm going to charge you more than I can get from your insurance company. You go try to do it. So direct primary care or concierge medicine is another way. So typically a concierge medicine doctor operates on, and though some direct primary care doctors do this as well, actually one of the interviews is with a direct primary care doctor who operates out of Portsmouth. I forget her name off the top of my head, but she's in the list of interviews that you've got to pick from. But she charges her patients a monthly premium, right? So you pay her $100 a month, and you can see her as many times as you want. Like imagine she at some point puts a limit on it, but basically you have her personal cell phone, you have her email, and you can make an appointment with her whenever you want. So you pay $100 a month and you basically have unlimited access. Call her anytime. I think there's an additional fee if you want her to come to your house and do a house call. But otherwise you have like this unlimited access. And what this allows her to do is have a very small, we call it panel, a very small number of patients that she's following. So most of these folks that do this direct primary care aim to only have like 400 or 500 patients. Now, if you go to a typical primary care doctor in the American system, they will typically have something like 1,500 to 2,000 patients that they're taking care of. So it's often hard to get an appointment with one of these people. So what she does is she just charges you $100 a month. You pay, set it up as a, on your PayPal or whatever. And then whenever you want to talk to her, you just pick up the phone and call her. And if she's busy, she'll call you back. And with 400 patients, she's got the time to do it. And she's got the time to sit down and have an hour-long conversation with you about your nutritional needs or whatever else, and you just get to chat. Whereas, I don't know if you've been to a primary care doctor visit lately, but they're typically like, okay, let's go. Tell me what's wrong. All right, I'm out of here. See you, next patient, right? So they're and they don't like that. Like if you talk to primary care doctors, they hate that. They're like, I can't do good medicine in 15-minute increments. I want to get to know, most primary care doctors go into family medicine or internal medicine because they want to build they want to build relationships with their patients. They want to get to know you. They want to know about your kids, and all this stuff, because all of that, good primary care doctors see you holistically as, the fact that you've got 2 kids and you're worried about, little Johnny getting into trouble or whatever, is going to affect your overall health. And so they want to know all these things. But in 15-minute increments, it's really hard to do that. And so they hate it, right? They really don't like it. And so this is becoming a more popular way of delivering care. But most insurance companies won't pay for it. So if you're already buying health insurance, this is something you have to pay for on top of your health insurance, because most health insurance companies won't pay for the concierge or the direct primary care. Concierge medicine is tends to be, that sounds kind of snotty, right? Like concierge medicine. It is, right? It tends to be more expensive. Again, it's very personalized service. So these folks, concierge medicine, doctors who are involved in concierge medicine, tend to direct themselves towards wealthy clients. But they become like the ideal of what you want from a primary care provider, which is they're paying attention to all your labs. They're calling, like if you go to see a specialist, they're on the phone calling the specialist to be like, all right, so what did you see when Frankie came in to see you? What did you find out? And then they'll start like talking doctor talk to the other doctor, right? That you can't do. They will be like, well, tell me about this lab result. And I read the literature and it says that's not what this means. And they will advocate for you. And it's a cool thing. A lot of doctors don't like dealing with primary care concierge doctors because they are kind of aggressive, but that's how they convince people to pay for their services. So it's an interesting, so that's, again, an example where you are paying directly for this care. So making the payment, you could do that, or you could have an insurance company make the payment, which is what most of us wind up doing. Most of us have insurance, and most of us, the actual cash payment is made, not cash, but the actual check is cut by Cigna on my behalf, right? I don't pay my doctor directly. That's a relatively simple part of the process. What's really valuable is this other part, which is negotiating the costs of the care with all the providers that you need. And so this is where having insurance really comes in handy, because the insurance company understands the care that you may only encounter once in your lifetime. Let's pray you never have cancer, but how much do you know about cancer and cancer treatments and what's an appropriate treatment and what's not an appropriate treatment? Probably not very much. I certainly don't know. And I've worked in healthcare most of my life. I wouldn't know, I'd be kind of at a loss. So what insurance companies do is they know all this stuff, and they know what works and what doesn't work. And they know relative prices. And so if a doctor says, hey, I want to charge, $2,000 for this thing, the insurance company is like, yeah, no, you're not going to pay $2,000. How about $500? And then they can say, well, if you want to charge all right, you're not going to take $500. Well, Dr. Jones over here will take $500. So that's where I'm going to send my patient. If you're not going to play ball, I'll send my patient over here. So they negotiate for you. They act in a sense as your agent, right? They're out there knowing and understanding the market in a way that you can't, unless you are a physician or an insurance person yourself. So that's the benefit. Is the health insurance companies are able to negotiate with providers because they have specialized knowledge that you don't have. So setting aside the actual process of paying, having an insurance company negotiate in advance for what the care is going to cost is useful. And why? Because this is the range of prices. So this is a little bit dated, but this is the range of prices for different kinds of MRI. First of all, look at all the different kinds of MRIs that you can have, right? We looked at magnetic resonance imaging, right? So MRI, but you could get, a brain MRI, a neck MRI, a chest MRI, blah, 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 all these things, right? And would you know that an MRI of a foot, ankle, leg, hip, right, should run between 975 and 6,300, whereas a brain will run between 1,600 and 8,400. Well, no, you wouldn't know that. But look at these crazy ranges depending on where you go. And this, you can see some of these same ranges like in a relatively small geographic area, like the seacoast of New Hampshire, will run ranges, maybe not quite this dramatic, but you know, you could have, you know, if you go to typical, I don't know the rates off the top of my head, but typically if you go to a hospital and use their MRI, it'll be 3 or 4 times as expensive as if you go to a standalone imaging center. So you could, you know, conceivably you could go to Wentworth Douglas. Well, hopefully none of my Wentworth Douglas people are listening to this, but you could go to Wentworth Douglas and they'll charge you $2,000 for an MRI. You could go down the street to Seacoast Imaging and they'll charge you $500 for the same MRI, right? So for the same scan, they'll charge you a quarter of what the hospital will charge you. And that's pretty normal. Like, I'm not casting aspersion on Wentworth Douglas. It's just pretty normal. And if you don't know that, you could wind up paying 4 times as much for your care, right? So the insurance company does you a favor by saying, all right, I see you've gotten a referral for an MRI. We're going to send you to Seacoast Imaging, not Wentworth Douglas, because Seacoast Imaging will do the same thing with the same quality, but for a quarter of the price. And if you're paying a portion of that, then you might care about that. And even if you're not paying a portion of it directly, you're paying a portion of it through your premiums, because as your medical loss ratio, as your expected medical loss goes up, so does your premium, right? Like we just talked about. So this is kind of wild and woolly kind of things. Like, and this exists for literally every kind of medical service. There are always high cost providers and low cost providers. And so the advantages of having an insurance company representing you is they negotiate for you on your behalf, and they identify lower cost, higher, ideally, I'm saying ideally, they locate the lower cost, higher quality provider. So, so here's an example. MRI with no insurance. Your doctor says, hey, you need an MRI. You know, you got a bum knee. You go to the nearest hospital, they bill you $2,000. You pay the $2,000. With insurance, the doctor sends a referral to the insurance company. The insurance company says, go to an outpatient imaging center, like I said, Seacoast MRI or Seacoast Imaging, where the insurance company has now pre-negotiated a price. The imaging center bills the insurance company their pre-negotiated price of $500. Your cost share is 20%, so you end up paying $100. That's a good deal, as opposed to paying $2,000, you're paying $100. Now, with the insurance, you're also, oh, by the way, paying your $20,000 a year, right, in premiums. So they're not doing it because they like you, they're doing it to get your premiums. But on average, you can actually be made better off by having the insurance company negotiate all this on your behalf. So looking at the quad model again, when we think about private health insurance, what they are mostly doing is they are mixing together the payment process and the insurance process, right? So they are indemnifying you against a major catastrophic loss. So if you come down with cancer and it's going to cost $100,000, you know, to treat you this year, they're covering your $100,000 in costs. They're covering your $100,000 in costs because I suspect for anybody in this room or online, $100,000 would be a catastrophic loss. Maybe there's some of you out there that's no big deal. If so, I'd like to come hang out with you. But for most of us, $100,000 is a catastrophic loss, right? So what they do is typically they blend together the insurance component and the payment component. And then the financing is you're either buying, in the United States, you're either buying the private health insurance at an individual plan, you're buying it yourself, or you're getting it through, the financing is through your employer, right? But the general function, Cigna, for me, right, provides catastrophic insurance, right, the protection against serious catastrophic loss, and then it does all the negotiating and all the bill paying, and they just tell me, okay, you owe you owe this much, this share of the costs. All right. So why merge it? Well, if you look at, car or homeowners insurance, I kind of already hinted at this. This is basic indemnity insurance. You get in a car, you get a snowstorm, and you run into a tree, right? You have a hailstorm that damages your roof. I have a fence line around the back of my house, and a couple of weeks ago we had that big windstorm. An old dead tree fell on my fence, so I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I'm gonna file a claim with my homeowner's insurance to get my fence fixed, right? And what they're going to do is they'll probably they'll probably just have me take some pictures, and then they'll be like, all right, we'll give you $1,000 for that, whatever. So that's indemnifying me, right? That's just making me whole again. Health insurance is different in the sense that, in the way that payments are made, right? So as we're calculating our benefits, we're adding it up rather than a claim at a time where you have a deductible. So for example, on that tree falling on my fence line, I have a $500 deductible. So each time I'm going to pay, they're going to deduct $500 from each incident with health insurance that accumulates over the course of a year. And I've got an example for that. We'll do that in a minute. So there's a win-win here for the insurance company and the beneficiary. If the health insurance company can keep the costs low, then they can keep the premiums low. We just talked about that. Like if I can keep my expected, if I'm an insurance company and I'm taking care of you, if I can negotiate lower cost treatments for you, then I can turn around and charge you a lower premium. So that's a win-win. Like you're happier with me. You are more likely to buy my health insurance product if I can give you a lower premium. So my negotiating with the with the providers to keep that cost low means I don't have to pay out as much, so I can keep more, but I can also charge you less and makes me more competitive. So you're less likely to go buy somebody else's health insurance. All right. Okay, good time. There are two kinds of risk rating that insurance companies use. So they determine, right, the probability of having to pay out a claim, right? So they look at when they examine you, and they're trying to figure out what's my expected loss. They look at a whole bunch of factors. So most of you guys have cars, yes? And you have insurance on your cars. Please say yes. Even though in New Hampshire, technically you don't have to have insurance, which is completely insane. Like who would drive without, I guess poor people who have nothing else to lose, right? So car insurance is experience rated. So if you get in an accident next year, your insurance company is likely to raise your rates because you've proven that you get in accidents. If you get a ticket, you get a speeding ticket, your insurance company is likely to raise your rates. If you get, certainly if you get a DUI, your insurance company is going to raise your rates. That's an example of experience rating. As the insurance company experiences your observes your actual lived experiences as to how much risk you have, they're going to set your rate. So with health insurance, experience rating with health insurance, if you're a young, healthy, nutrition major that eats nothing but kale and runs marathons every weekend, right, you are going to pay a very low health insurance premium because you're unlikely to get sick because you're just so healthy. You're an old fat dude that eats bonbons on the weekend and doesn't exercise. Bonbons. All right, so then they're going to charge a higher rate, right? So it used to be, particularly in the individual market, If you had a pre-existing condition, so if you had cancer in the past, or if you had mental health issues, or if you had a whole variety of things, that you had when you went to try to buy health insurance, the insurance company would be like, well, we know you have these things wrong with you, so we're going to increase your premium because we know that given your prior experiences, your prior health conditions, we expect to have to pay more for you. And so because we have a higher expected loss, the premium has to be higher as well. So under experience rating, right, you would look at, health insurance used to operate a lot like car insurance. Community rating is when you look at a whole population, a community, right? And the whole community pays the same premium. So everybody in the community, we don't sort out, oh, that person, drives too fast, that person, eats ice cream for breakfast, and so on. That person smokes, for example, right? Instead, what we say is everybody in this community pays the same rate. So, for example, everybody who lives in Durham would be a community rate. So everybody who lives in Durham, if we all paid the same rates, that would be community rating. And so they would look at, when setting the rate, they would look at how much does the whole population spend on healthcare, and then they divide that by really simple math. They take the total spend, divide it by the number of people, and that's your expected medical cost, right? And then we calculate the medical loss ratio and blah blah blah. We got our premium. So as a result, if we're all sitting here, if we're all in a community together, I get to pay. If it was individual experience rating, because I'm significantly older than you, right? They would charge me more, charge you guys less. If we're all lumped into the same community together, I get to pay the same as you, which means that you have to pay more than you would pay if you were evaluated on an individual basis. But if I'm lumped in with you, you all get to pay more. So thank you so much. Right. So individual premiums used to be able to be set based on experience rating. The ACA has eliminated that, and all individual premiums are now set on a community basis. They can use adjusted community, insurers can use adjusted community rating. And what that means is they can consider geography, they can consider age, and they can consider whether you use tobacco, and that's it. So Durham is actually a relatively, healthy town where a lot of people that live in Seacoast, New Hampshire are fairly outdoorsy kind of people, like to get a lot of exercise, relatively speaking, like to get a lot of exercise. Other parts of the country are, do less of that. Other parts of New Hampshire do less of that. They're also probably aware that other parts of New Hampshire have serious opioid issues, right? Durham isn't one of them. I'm not saying that there aren't people with opioid issues here, but it's just not as high a prevalence as in other parts of the state. And New Hampshire has some really bad opioid issues. So they can look at the community based on geography. Then they can striate us, so I don't get away with making you pay completely for me. They can striate us break us into groups based on age. So you guys would be in a different group than I would be in, right? And then they can ask, do we use tobacco? Hopefully none of you use tobacco. It's nothing but bad. So regardless, even with adjusted community rating, you're still going to wind up paying. You're going to if you're a healthy, like I said, healthy, nutrition major that eats nothing but kale and does all your marathons on the weekend, you're going to get lumped in with your colleagues who you all know don't do that, right? Like there's plenty of people, plenty of UNH students that don't live healthy lifestyles. And so you'll get lumped in with those people, and you'll, as a result, because you're all in it together, the healthy people wind up subsidizing the less healthy people. Some other, let me see where we're at. Okay, we'll have to stop there. All right, so we'll pause there and wrap up on Thursday. Be safe.
Thank you.